Okay, Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Moshe and Susie Feder, Le'ilu Nishmas Mrs. Feder's father, Simcha Aryeh ben Yosef Tzvi, whose your title was on the 17th of year. We are on the first wide line. We're going to go back 3 lines from yesterday just to be able to get ourselves a good running start. From Chaf Hema Beis, 25b, on the first wide line. Amar Rabbi says, Mode Rav agrees. Now we had this, remember that we have Rav and Shmuel. Technical rules from the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, Bira'ah u'lehetiv, that it has to be for the positive and for the negative. Rav and Shmuel both agree that in order for there to be a prohibition, in order to wind up being liable for a sacrifice, for a oath, you need to have taken an oath that has both the potential, even though you didn't do both, right? You picked a statement, but that statement could equally work in the reverse, both positive and negative. So it will be I ate or I did not eat, right? Both the positive and the negative. Then we have Shmuel. Shmuel points out that you need, in order to be able to be liable, you need to have a past tense component and a future tense component. So therefore, not only is it I ate, but it has to be able to then be translated into I will eat. And so we have circumstances where you won't be able to do that, and they have arguments. For example, the argument we had yesterday was he ate, right? I could swear that he ate. So that I swear he ate, and I can swear he didn't eat. That would be fine. But I can't swear that he will eat because that's not in my control. So therefore, a future tense, corresponding future tense couldn't exist. So therefore, that will be subject to our argument between Rav and Shmuel. So that's what we had discussed in Rav and Shmuel. Now Rabbi says, Umod Rav would agree, be'omer lechaver, that a person says to his friend, Shevuos she'ani yodea lecha edus. So if a person takes an oath, right, that he says, I know testimony for you, right? And it turns out he's lying, right? He didn't. Depater. That is not considered a Shevuos bitui, that you're going to be liable for a sacrifice. You're exempt. Why? Because you can't make the corresponding phrase that I don't know testimony for you. Why? Because I don't know testimony for you is a different kind of shvua. That's called Shevuos ha'edus. Shevuos ha'edus is a testimony where a person comes and says, I need you to testify for me because I know you saw that I loaned so-and-so money. I need you to testify for me. And this guy doesn't want to get involved. So he says, I swear I don't know testimony. That, the Torah tells us, is a violation of the requirement to be a witness when you know testimony. Now, there are technical details of such a shvuah. Technical details are that the only time you can actually be liable for that violation of an oath is if you're a valid witness, hence your testimony would help somebody. Also, it has to be in court where your valid testimony would be helpful to that person. So you're not liable if you do that. If somebody comes over to your house and says, you know testimony, he says, I swear I don't, right? That's not a violation of that oath. Nevertheless, the statement, I don't know testimony for you, doesn't apply. That's not a Shevuos bitui. That's not the same kind of a shvuah that a person is saying, I didn't eat. I don't know testimony, falls under a different category. Hence, the opposite oath, I do know testimony for you, is ineffective. Because that's not, if the negative, I don't know testimony for you, is not a Shevuos bitui, then the positive, I do know testimony for you, is also not a Shevuos bitui. Because you need, Rav agrees, that you need to have both a positive component and a negative component. Okay? So, yadati velo yadati. Now, if a person says, I knew testimony, or I didn't know testimony, that's machlokas. That's going to be an argument. Why is that an argument? Because there's no problem saying I knew testimony or I didn't know testimony, right? That's different than saying that I have testimony for you or I didn't have testimony. It's basically saying I'm not going to testify. This is just stating the fact that I know it, right? I'm not saying whether I'm going to testify or I'm not going to testify. The issue, though, is, right, that there's no corresponding future tense oath, right? A person says, That's going to be machlokes, right? Because Shmuel says that you need also the future tense oath, right? And so if he says that I will know that's the corresponding future tense oath is, I will know testimony for you, and I will not know testimony for you. Well, that is impossible. How will you know whether you're going to know something? That's not up to you. So therefore, since the future tense oath is not possible, that's where Shmuel will say that even the past tense oath is not in the category of Shevuos Bitu that you're obligated for a korban. And also, He'adati v'lo he'adati, I testified for you or I did not testify for you, is also going to be subject to machlokas, because the idea for the corresponding future tense oath, I can't make either. I will testify to you is a mitzvah. And we said that you can't, because testifying is a mitzvah. You cannot take an oath to perform a mitzvah. That was our technique. We're going to see that today. You can't take an oath to do a mitzvah. So therefore, for a technical reason, the future tense is not valid. So where we have this interesting statement of Abaye, is that his point out is that when it comes to a statement where one of the halves of the Shevuos Bitui turns into a Shevuos Ha'idus, which is a different type of Shevuah, then it's not a Shevuos Bitui at all, and therefore it's not going to apply. But if I have a circumstance where the Shevuos Bitui does work in the past tense, negative and positive, it will be a machlokas if I can't have that corresponding statement for the future. That's a good review of some of the things we talked about yesterday. And if you were confused at the end of yesterday, we're back to being confused. So,
Shevuos of Nazir is a mitzvah.
Shua of Nazir is not a mitzvah in the sense that there's no mitzvah to be a Nazir. Right? There's a mitzvah that when you are a Nazir here, you can't do this, you can't do this. There's no positive commandment, you shall become a Nazir. Right? Bishlama lishmuel. So, fine. According to Shmuel, Damar milsa delesi bilahaba lo mechayvale lishe'avar. So, this was Shmuel's opinion. I understand according to Shmuel. Shmuel, again, remember, he's the one who said that if I take a past tense shvuah, right, if there's no corresponding future tense to that shvuah, then it's not considered in the category of the Shevuos Bitui that you're going to be chayva korban. Lahachi afka rachmana l'shvuos edus michlal Shevuos Bitui. Think about what that is. Why would it be that a Shevuos ha'edus exists at all? Shevuos ha'edus, again, is I testify, I don't know testimony for you. So, according to Shmuel, right? So he says that I can't testify I will know testimony for you or I won't know testimony for you. Therefore, a past tense oath of I know testimony for you or I don't know testimony for you is also meaningless, right? So if that's meaningless, the Torah had to say, but I'm going to add a new prohibition. A new prohibition is if I swear that I don't know testimony, you could be liable to that. Not under the category of Shevuos Bitui, which is the pronunciation oath, but under the category of Shevuos Ha'edus, new category, and it doesn't use the same rules as Shevuos Bitui. Shevuos Bitui, again, needs past tense and future tense. It needs positive and negative. Shevuos Ha'edus does not. Shevuos Ha'edus is just relating to testimony. So therefore, I understand, according to Shmuel, why such an oath, the Torah makes a new category of an oath. Because without that new category, a Shvuah that I don't know testimony for you would otherwise not be a violation that would require sacrifice. Right? So therefore, this new category has to exist. Ela l'Rav, but if you look at Rav, so then l'may hilchasa afka rachmana. Why does the Torah have to say that there's this new category of an oath that I swear that I don't have testimony, right? Because without this new category, it would still be a violation of a Shevuos Bitui. I'm lying. I'm saying I don't know testimony, and I really do. That's a lie. Therefore, I'm chayiv.
Chayiv korban?
And you're chayiv korban, according to Rav.
There's no like fifth in Jewish law. It's either I can or I cannot, right?
No, there's no pleading. There's no plead the fifth. There's no Fifth Amendment in. It's a United States thing. It's not even a Canada thing.
Is there a halacha like that in Torah, or you could be like, I just.
Ein adam mesim atzmo rasha. Right? That is a category. Now, the category says that ein adam mesim atzmo rasha means that if I testify against myself, I can't make myself liable. Right. Now, that has limitations. That doesn't work when it comes to financial matters because a person is mod ba'atzmo is ne'aman k'mei edim. A person who admits that he owes money, he's liable. But if a person admits he commits a crime, he's not chayav b'knas. He's not chayav ba'onshin, right? So you're right. There is such a concept, right? It's not the fifth. And your testimony, right? You could say your testimony. You cannot make another Mesi Russia. You can't make yourself into a Russia. That is the case.
But against other people, it's your.
Other person testifies against me, then I could be liable, right? So okay. Amrua Rabbanan Kame de Abaye. So Rabbanan said before Abaye, Lechyuvi ale tarti. The answer is, this is right. And Abaye said, it's because we're going to make you liable to two things, right? The reason why the Torah says, prohibition number one, you lied, you said you had testimony, it's a lie. That's obligation number one. Number two, new category of shvuah, that you said you don't know testimony. That is a second prohibition. You're going to be liable to sacrifices for the one lie. Okay, that's what Abaye says. Amar Lahu. So I'm sorry. That's what they said. That's what Rabbanan said to Abaye. So Amar Lahu. So Abaye said back to them, Tarti lo matzisu. You can't obligate a person to sacrifices for the one statement. Why? Because Amrisu, we said, Detanya we learn a brisa. La'achas me'ela. The pasuk says that when are you obligated to bring korban olav yored? When you violate one of these shvuos. So la'achas atamechayvo v'atamechayvo shtayim. Every oath is going to fall under one of these categories. There's no such thing as a double category shvuah, right? So even though you're right, according to Rav, it would seem that this oath, I don't know testimony for you, falls into two categories: a lie and a denial of testimony, which is a separate category. I can't be obligated to two sacrifices because the Torah says so. Okay. So now, according to Abaye, what is the purpose then? If I already have a lie, I don't know testimony for you, already prohibited in the Torah, so then why is it that I need to also make it prohibited to not testify? Say I don't want to testify. So Afke Rahmana Lichedetanya. So the Torah explains as follows: Bekulan Ne'amar V'Nelam. In all of the prohibitions, on all of these oaths, in order to be liable for a sacrifice, it has to say v'ne'elam. You forgot, right? If you violated on purpose, you're getting malchus. The korban is only if you forgot about your oath. V'kan lo nemar v'ne'elam. Here it does not say v'ne'elam when it comes to the shvuah of the testimony, right? L'chayev al amazing kishogig. That tells me that you know what the different rule is when it comes to testifying. Even if I know I'm lying, right? Person comes and says, you're going to testify for me. And I say, I don't know, right? And I'm lying, and I swear to that. And I know it, I'm liable for a korban, even though I'm doing it on purpose.
And if you can't afford
that's unique.
If you can't afford the korban, is there anything you could do instead?
So it's korban olav yored. So it's going to be also, the value of the korban is going to be changed depending on how much money you have, right? So that's not going to bother us. But the chiddush is that, and that's what Rabbi says, you know what the big deal about this Shevuos Ha'edim is? Shevuos Ha'edim is unique, because even if I know I'm lying, I'm still liable to korban, right? Not malchus. Amrulei Rabbanan Abaye. So the Rabbanan said to Abaye, Ema b'mezid mechayev chada b'shogim mechayev tarti. Okay, very, very fair point. So let's say somebody takes this shvuah on purpose. He lies and he knows he's lying. So if he knows he's lying, he's b'mezid. That's not going to be Shevuos bitui. Because Shevuos bitui, he's going to get malchus for it. But this is a Shevuos ha'edus, he's going to bring the korban. Fine, he's going to bring one korban. Let's say, though, he does b'shogig. Let's say he says, I don't know testimony, but he didn't realize that he did. So now, is that a double whammy? Is he liable both for the lie, which he did b'shogig, and for the Shevuos ha'edus? So the answer is, Amar Lahu, he said back to them, Lav, Hainu Dami, that's what I told you. The pasuk says, La'achas, achas etem mechayvo v'yetem mechayvo shtayim. You're only liable for the one, not for the two. You can never be liable to sacrifices. So even in a circumstance where it was negligent and you might have thought that you could be liable to, you're not liable to. So that's what Abaye says. Ve'i b'mezid mi'ikatarti. So he says, now, if the person... If the circumstance, and his point is that why would I need a pasuk to tell me that I'm only going to be liable one korban? It can't be talking about a circumstance of mezid on purpose, because b'mezid you wouldn't be liable for the second sacrifice of the Shevuos bitui, because that doesn't apply when you're shogeg. So that would only be one. So why does the Torah go out of its way to tell me in a circumstance where you might have thought you're liable two, you're only liable one? That's the case of shogeg. So you're never liable to two. Okay, good. So that's how Abaye warns. Rava Amar Rava, right, he's going to give a different answer. So Rava says, he differs with Abaye, and he's explaining why is it that the Shevuos Edus is not required to have a separate korban. He says, Mishum dehava davar shebichlal v'yatzig lidon bedavar achadash. His Shevuos Edus is what's called, in technical, although this doesn't fit exactly in the category properly, there was a Shvuah that was already prohibited. It was already a lie if you say, I don't know testimony. And then the Torah goes out of its way and says, this is a new type of Shvuah. Shevuos ha'edus is a different type of a Shvuah, and it has different rules. You're only liable if you're a kosher edus. You're only liable if you're in court. That's not the case when it comes to other lies. Okay? So, ein lechabot ela chidusho bilvad. So the rule is, says Rava, that once you have a new category of Avera, it doesn't have any of the rules of the other type of category that it used to be a part of. It's now a new thing. So therefore, you can't carry over any of the rules, i.e. the korban that you would have been required to bring if you had lied. That doesn't apply anymore, because the Torah now tells you, this oath, I swear that I don't know testimony for you, is no longer a Shevuos Bitui. It is now a Shevuos Edus. Therefore, don't ever consider it to be a Shevuos Bitui, and you're not going to be liable for a sacrifice for that. Miklal, de Abaye Savar, Ise Lishvua Ba'olam. So that means that Abaye seems to imply that it really is technically a Shevuos Bitui. It is a lie of an oath. It's just that you're not liable to sacrifice for it. That's what Abaye is saying. You can't be liable to do sacrifice. Rava says it's not an oath at all. Now it's a Shevuos Edus, not at all a Shevuos Bitui anymore. But that means that Abaye is saying it is a Shevuos Bitui. Well, if that's the case, if it's really a Shevuos Bitui, well, then let's go back to what we said at the very beginning of our shiur. The Amar Abaye, Abaye says, let's say a person made the testimony and he said, I know testimony about you. Now, he doesn't, right? The putter, he's exempt. Why is he exempt? Because you can't make the corresponding statement of, I don't know testimony to you. Now, why not? Why can't he make that statement? You're going to tell me what? It's a Shevuos Edus? That's fine. Abaye says it's both Shevuos Edus and Shevuos Bitui, just that we have a rule in the Torah that says you're not bringing a sacrifice for it, but it's still a Shevuos Bitui. So therefore, there is a positive and there is a negative. So therefore, if I swear I do know testimony, that should be a Shevuos Bitui. So, Hadar be Abaye me'ahi. The answer is, Abaye changed his mind about that. Abaye changed his mind. Not true. Really, at the end of the day, you're right. That oath does work, right? A shvuah that I do know testimony and I don't, I'm not putter. Or else, if you want, I will say, and now we're in Chavav Amid Aleph, Chada minayhu Rav Papa Amra. That the reason why it doesn't square up is because one of them is not Abaye, one of them is Rav Papa. So therefore, it's not Abaye's statement. So therefore, it's okay if they disagree with each other. One's Rav Papa, one's Abaye. Okay. Next. Rabbi Yishmael says, Eno chayav elahal asid lavo. Rabbi Yishmael says that when it comes to being chayav a korban for a Shevuos Bitui, you're only liable for a future tense oath, right? I will do something and I won't do something. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says, even for the future and the past tense. That's the Machutz Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned. Now we're going to explain the psukim. Lehara u lehetiv. The pasuk says, you have to be able to swear for the bad or for the good. So that means that the pasuk's telling me that I'm not allowed to swear for something to do bad or to do good. How do I know that I'm also that the oath where the item is what we call a reshus? It's not a good thing, not a bad thing. It's a your own choice thing. How do I know that's included in this shvuah that if I lie about, I'm going to bring a korban? Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, "Oh nefesh kisi shba levate bisfasayim," or a soul who swears to utterance of his lips. So therefore, any utterance of lips, whether it doesn't have to be good or bad, also is included in the prohibition. Ainli el lehaba, so that is only future tense. Right? That's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Lishavar minayin. How do I know it's going to include past tense? Talmud Lomar, pasuk says, L'kol asher yivatah adam b'shvuah. The pasuk says anything that a person will utter with an oath. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's how Rabbi Akiva learns. So Rabbi Akiva is going to include positive, negative, reshus, and past tense as well. Rabbi Yishmael disagrees. Lahara ulehetiv lahaba. To good or for the bad is the future tense oath. Amar, and that's it. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva says, Im kain, ein liel dvarim sheish ben hatava hara. So then we're only talking about good and bad, Rabbi Akiva says. How do I know dvarim shein bahem hara v'hatava minayin? How do I know I'm going to include the things that are rishus, that are not good or bad? Amar lo, so he said back to him, me ribui hakasav. From the extra words in the pasuk that you just said. Those extra words tell me that I'm going to include the rishus items as well. Amar los, which Rabbi Akiva says, im riba hakasav l'kach, once you are including the rishus parts of the vow, the some good rishus, the non-obligatory types of oaths, right? How do I then riba hakasav l'kach? So then you also should include in it the past tense, right? That was the way I read the pasuk. The way I read the pasuk is include more things, so include the past tense also. So Shapi Karmeli Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Shmuel. That's the end of our Mishnah. But how can you end the Mishnah there? Rabbi Akiva's got a good answer. He told Rabbi Shmuel very nicely, right? Should include the past tense too. Good.
Yeah, the good, the bad. Rishus is like if I make a Shevuos, I'm going to daven Marav. Marav is considered.
No, well, it would be more like I'm going to eat this cake. I'm going to eat this piece of bread. That was the one we've been using, right? I'm not going to eat this wheat bread. Okay. That's Rishus, not mitzvah, right? Right. Rishus.
But Marav is considered.
Marav is a good one. We call Marav is a tefillah of Rishus, but I don't want to say that because saying Shema is a mitzvah. Right. Right. So certainly you're Makayim a mitzvah if you daven Marav, right? So. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan answers Rabbi Shmuel. Shishime says Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. He says, well, Rabbi Shmuel's Rebbe was a fellow named Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana shahadorish haTorah kula b'kal uprat. We've had this before. He used to teach everything in the Torah when you had a generalization, a specific and a generalization. In the strategy, as we've discussed before, a klal uprat strategy. And iunami dorish b'klal uprat. Therefore, he also uses the klal uprat strategy. We're going to see how that makes a difference. Rabbi Akiva, sheshim es Nochem ish Gamzu, Rabbi Akiva learned with Nochem ish Gamzu. And therefore, shahad dorish es kol Torah kula beriba umiyat. He taught everything in the Torah through Ribo Miyat. Right. Therefore, Iunami Dorish Ribo Miyat. Therefore, that's what Rabbi Akiva used. Ribo Miyat. So we're going to see it in a moment. We're going to see Ribo, right? We did this in Makos, right? Now I think it was in Makos, right? Yeah. Now we're going to go through this. We're going to explain it in a second, Yudah. So hang on. That's why I decided I'll rush through because further on, we go through it in detail. My Rabbi Akiva Didarish Ribo Umiyat. Let's explain the Rabbi Akiva. Let's go to Rabbi Akiva who explains the concept of Ribo Umiyat. Okay, Tanya, we're going to Brisa. O nefesh ki sishva, the pasuk says, any soul who takes an oath, that's riba. That is a generalization. That means any oath can be liable for this sacrifice. Anything is included. And then it says lehara u lehetev. It has to be for good or for bad. So that's miyut. That's the specificity. Then it goes back and it says lekol asher yivata adam. Anything that a person utters. Chazer v'riba. So now that's a generalization again. Riba umiyat v'riba. This is the pattern of a pasuk called riboy, miyut, and riboy. What happens? Riba hakol. It includes everything. When you have a riboy, miyut, uriboy, everything is good. All oaths that you could possibly make are now prohibited, and you're going to bring a sacrifice. My riba, what are we including? Riba kol mili. Everything is included. That's how riboy and miyut works. Everything's included. Umay miyut, but you're going to exclude one thing. The thing that is most unique, that's the case that we're going to exclude, but only that case. Miyut davar mitzvah. The one thing that you're going to exclude is going to be a mitzvah. The one thing you're not liable for Shevuos bitoyon, as we've been saying many, many times, is if you swear to perform a mitzvah or not to perform it. That does not count. Okay? That's the one circuit. That's riba miyut. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Therefore, you need a positive and negative oath. It can be a rishus, that's included. It can be past tense, that's included. You know what's only the only thing that's not included? Mitzvah, that's the only thing. Now, that's Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Shmuel darish klal prat. Rabbi Shmuel is going to look at this, he's going to klal prat. How does it work? O nefesh ki sishba levate bisfasayim. First comes the generality, right? A person comes to swear to an utterance of his lips. That's the klal, that's the generality. Includes everything. Lehara lehetev. Then it says for good or for bad. That's the prat, that's the detail. L'kol asher yivateha adam. Then it goes back and says anything that a person utters, chazer klal. That is the generality again. That we're going to learn as klal upratu klal, says Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, which now Rabbi Shmuel is picking up, that this is the rule. We're going to follow klal upratu klal. How does that work? Iyatadon ela prat. You're only going to include one thing which is most similar to the unique circumstance. You need a positive and a negative, but you're only including one type of oath that is similar to a positive and a negative. Ma prat mefurish lahaba, just like a positive and the negative are both in the future tense. I will do something. I will do that good thing. I won't do that. I will do that bad thing. I won't do that good thing. Afkol lehaba. So too, it's going to include only something which is in the future tense, which means our davar rishus in the future tense.
We learned from the prat. I'm trying to remember this. I remember going through this last time. We learned from the prat the lesson of what it applies to in the future. That's the specificity, whatever that word is, that defines the general.
Yes.
Right.
And therefore, what is not included is past tense.
Right.
That's the difference of viewpoint between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. If you hold riboy, so you're going to include more things. You're going to include past tense. If you hold klal pradu klal, you are going to include less things. You're not going to include past tense.
Right.
And that's the difference of opinion between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. Very nice.
That's how you get the one not taking past
That's one's going to include it and one's not, even though they're learning it from the same pasuk. Okay, now, La suye, that's going to include afil dvarm she'en bahen harav hatava lehaba. He's going to explain even those things that are not for good or for bad in the future tense. So ahani prata lemuute afil dvarm she'en bahen hara'a vehatava lesha'avar. And the miut is going to tell me that we're going to exclude those things that are good or bad in the past tense. Now, epuch. One second, did I read that right? Or is that epuch? No, that's the next thing. Okay. La harav hatava lesha'avar.
What did he say?
1 second. But first, laba afkol lehaba, right? Right? Ahani klala. The klala is coming to include afil dvarim she'en bahen harav hatava. Those things lehaba. It's coming to include those things that are not just for good or bad in the future. Ahani prata. And the detail that comes to exclude is lemuute afil dvarim she'en bahen harav hatava lesha'avar. That we're going to exclude even the positive and negative things that are in the past tense. That's how he's going to learn. Okay, good. So that's what it is. Now, epuch ana. But why don't you flip that around? You have to include something, you have to exclude something. You decided to include the future tense, even non-positive and negative things.
Right.
Why didn't you include the past tense things that are positive and negative, good and bad, and exclude the future tense things that are rishus?
Right.
Why not include the other way? I mean, you're going to include one, you're going to exclude the other. That we got.
Right.
But why'd you pick which one to exclude? So Amar Rav Yitzchak explains, Dumya de la hara o lehetev. Right? The answer is that it is similar, going in the future tense, the rishus items are similar to the lehara o lehetev. Misha isuro mishum bal yachel devaro, yatsa sazu she'en isuro mishum bal yachel devaro, ela mishum bal teshakru. He says that, why? Because these prohibited items in the future tense, as we discussed, what the prohibited pasuk is going to be, bal yachel dvaro is you should not profane your words. That applies to future tense items. When you are going to talk about something in the past tense, that's a different pasuk. That's bal tishakru, don't lie. That's past tense. That's not similar. It's a different avera. So therefore, let's stick with the future tense, which is in the same pasuk bal yachel dvaro, and we'll include the dvarim that are rishus, not go into a different pasuk and include the positive and negatives of the past tense. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abin Amar, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abin gives a slightly different answer, but it's very similar. Amar Kro, the pasuk says, "O nefesh kisi shava levate bisfasayim." Look what the pasuk says. The pasuk says, "A soul who swears the utterance of his lips," means Misha shvua kodemes lebitui velo shabitui kodemes l'shvua. That means the oath comes first, then the action of the oath. Meaning that I first swear I won't do something, and then I violate my oath later when I do the item. Not something that's the other way around. Yotzazu achalti, not the other way around, where I do the action and then I took the oath later. Right. So the past tense things is out. Yotzazeh, so what am I excluding? Achalti v'lo achalti. I ate or I didn't eat. Where shamaisa kodem l'shvua, the action is before the oath. So therefore, that's why that's less comparable.
How does the klal and the prat work on that?
The klal works the same way. We're basically going to include one and exclude the other.
Right.
We're just trying to figure out which one is more similar to lahara u lahatava, which is the prat.
Right.
And we're suggesting this answer is lahara u lahatava is I take the oath and then the violation happens after I took the oath, not where I did the issue and then the moment I said the oath I violated it. That's different. That's a different story.
Right, okay. But which one's the which is the klal in that example? Which is the prat?
The
prat is the
prat is lahara latava.
Okay,
that's still always the prat.
Okay, that's still
the klal is that we're going to now include other oaths of utterance.
Right.
And now we're still trying to, then we said other oaths of utterance apply to Rishus of the future.
Right.
We're just struggling with the question, why did you include Rishus oaths of the future rather than Lahara Ulatava oaths of the past?
Right.
So we're just trying to show that the Rishus oaths of the future are more similar and therefore more appropriate to include than the Lahara Ulatava oaths of the past, which have a difference in some kind of a way.
Okay.
They're unique, and therefore that's what we're going to come to exclude. Tana Rabbanan, a rabbi's word. Ha'adam bishvua, pasuk says, and a man takes a shvua. That means prat la'onus. That means if a person is unaware when he's taking his oath that he is wrong, so that's not going to bring a korban, right? Person says, I ate something, and he thinks he did, right? Then it turns out he didn't. Right? Then he is ones, and that's not a korban. Right? Person, in order to be chayav a korban, we're going to see that what the circumstance is. He has to be shogeg, and we're going to wonder what shogeg is then, right? Because mazid is, I know I'm lying. When I don't know I'm lying, that's called ones. Then what's shogeg? So before you worry about that, don't worry about that's coming up either, hopefully today, but
That's
maybe
confusing,
tomorrow.
right? Because what's the in-between?
There is no in-between. That's exactly right. So if that's bothering you...
That was a b'shoigeg in the first.
That's right. That's why I'm pointing it out. Right. That's not. We would have thought all this time we were thinking, you know what bishogeg is? Bishogeg is, I thought I'm telling the truth, but I made a mistake. Not true. Oh, that's ones. What's shogeg?
So what's the chashash of...
Hang on.
What's the chashash of making a shavua?
Sorry?
What's the chashash of making a shavua? Either I'm right, and I'm right, and I'm...
Or I think I'm right. It's an issue of what I think I am.
Right.
If I think I'm right, then I don't bring a korban.
Right. I mean, it's not...
And if I know I'm wrong, I don't bring a korban.
Right.
So when do I bring a korban?
Right. No,
Yeah.
but I'm saying...
You're asking the right question.
Right. So what's the chashash?
I just want to make sure you know you're right asking the right question. If you don't know the answer to that question, you have to wait till next page. We'll see how we
At
do
least it's not like 6 Gemara.
That's correct. It's not that far away, right? I didn't realize when I read this how difficult that is, but then when you read the Gemara later on, I just want to point out that you're probably thinking, wait a second. Onus is, I think I'm right. You're not. Okay, but you thought you were. That's onus.
Right.
Dvenelam, and venela means prat lemezid, right? That means that this is going to exclude that the item is hidden for you. That means that somebody who does it on purpose also doesn't bring a korban. Mi menu, from him, shenis alma mi menu, shavua. So this is when is it that he is liable, right? Because he has to the shvua has to be hidden from him, right? The mistake he makes is going to be that he doesn't know the shvua that he made. Yachol shenis alma mi menu chayfetz. What if there's a circumstance where he doesn't know this is the object that he's liable for? Tamilomer bishvua v'nelam. So therefore, we're going to try to figure out what the case is later, but let's just go with this for now, right? In order for us to be liable for a korban, the mistake has to be in forgetting the oath in some way. So not the object. So because the pasuk says, you might think it includes that if I forget the object, I also have to bring a shvua. Therefore it says, v'nelam, and he forgets, al halim shvua, hu chayav einu chayav al halim chavetz. The pasuk specifically says that if you forget the shvua, right, the way that it sounds is that I'm going to be shogeg in a circumstance where I take an oath that I'm not going to drink coffee, and then I forgot that I took that oath, and then I drink the coffee. That's when I'm going to be liable. That's future tense. That works in future tense, right?
But that'll be my fault for giving it to you.
So that way you wouldn't have known. You're a good
That's
guy.
where
You're a
it is.
good
That's
guy.
the answer.
Right? That's future tense. Doesn't
Right.
help you in the past tense, but that's a future tense, okay?
Right.
So, however, if I said I'm not going to drink coffee, and then Yehuda hands me a cup of something, and I don't know what it is, and I drink it, it turns out it's coffee, that I'm not liable, korban, for.
Right.
That's what it says.
Only when I forget. That's what we're saying. When we forget that in between. That's what we're
Correct.
saying. Right
That
before.
works. Okay, so that's good. So Amar Mar. So Mar says Ha'adam bishvua prat laones. So we have this circumstance, right? Somebody says Ha'adam bishvua. So that's going to exclude our ones. So then, Heichi dami. So what's our case here? Derav kahana v'ravasi ki havu kami mikami derav. Here's the story. Okay, the story is that Rav Kahana and Ravasi were standing in front of Rav. Mar amar shvuasa dehachim Rav. Mar shvuasa dehachim Rav. They had an argument with each other, and each one said, "Rav said it my way," and they were so adamant about it. They each took an oath, and they each said, "Rav said it my way," and the other one said, "Rav said it my way." They said, "Fine, let's go ask Rav." So they went to go ask Rav. Ki also l'kamei derav amar kechad minayu. Rav said, no, he's right. Doesn't matter who it was, right? Doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is one of them was wrong, and therefore Amar Le Idach, the other guy says, Vana b'shikra ishtabai, I made a false oath now because I was wrong. So what do? Amar Le libcha anascha. He says your heart makes you an ones. In other words, when you took the oath, you thought you were right. That's not a shvua. That's an ones, right? The only way that we've talked about a shvua so far is in the future tense. We couldn't figure out the past tense yet. We'll have to figure that out. But because past tense, he thought he was right, therefore it's not a korban.
Right.
Venela mimenu, then Pasuk says, Venela, it's hidden from him. Shenis ala mimenu shvua, the thing that he forgot is the oath. Yachush nisala mimenu chayfetz, you might think that if he forgot the item as well, Talmud Lomar, the Pasuk says, Bishvua venela mimenu, alem shvua hu chayev, enu chayev alem chayfetz. He's not liable if he forgets the object, only if he forgets the oath. That was what the Brisa says. Now, machahu alei mimarava, in Eretz Yisrael, they laughed about this brisa. They said, that cannot be right. That's a big problematic brisa, right? I understand a circumstance where the person can forget their oath without forgetting the item. Kegon, for example, right? He says, I take an oath that I will not eat wheat bread. And he made a mistake. He said, I am going to eat the bread. So his mistake, what's his mistake? And he eats the bread. What's his mistake? His mistake is in the oath. Okay, I understand that case. That case makes sense. The shvua say inshi, right? So therefore what he forgot was the shvua. He forgot what oath he made. He thought he said he was going to eat it, and he said he wasn't going to eat it. That's a mistake. But chefza dakir, but he remembered the item. He knew wheat bread was the thing that we were talking about. So Ella, it's bil shvua hechidami. How could you possibly forget the item without forgetting the oath? That makes no sense. So the answer, so we try to give some answers. Because why? Because what would you have forgotten? Right? Maybe it's simple, right? Guy says, I'm not going to eat wheat bread, and he said, I'm not going to eat barley bread. So he made a mistake in the item.
Right.
But Yehuda's right. It's still a mistake in the shvua, because so the shvua say dakir lei chavtza inchi. That would be a circumstance we're suggesting is where he remembered the oath, but he forgot what the oath was on. So the answer is no. Kevin de chavtza inchi lehu hainu helam shvua, says Yehuda, and he's right that if that's the case, I really forgot what my oath was. Right. I thought my oath was wheat bread, but I thought my oath was barley bread, but it's really wheat bread. I didn't forget the object. I forgot the oath. So that's not going to work. So that's why they laughed at this. There's no circumstance where a person would forget the object, right? You only forget what oath you took.
Right. So is that chayav achatos? That's considered forgetting.
So that would be forgetting the oath, and you'd be chayav.
Right.
Okay. Ella Amar Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar explains, no. David da achas he says that they're both the same. Right? They're both one. Right, it's the same item. That's the idea. That's why they were laughing about it in Eretz Yisrael. There's no such thing as forgetting the object without forgetting the shvua. That's how he concluded. Maskifla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks the following question, right? So he says, Alma chayfetz below shvua lo mishkachas la. So he says, what you're suggesting is there's never a circumstance, is what we're saying, right, where you could forget the object without forgetting the oath. I'll give you a case where you can forget the object without forgetting the oath. He takes an oath, I'm not going to eat wheat bread. So he sticks his hand in the bread basket, planning to take wheat bread. Barley bread. Sorry, he wants to take barley bread, so he doesn't violate his oath. And he accidentally takes some wheat bread, and he thinks it's barley bread, and he eats it. He remembered his oath, and he forgot his item. So that's what Rav Yosef says. That's the circumstance when you forget your item, right? He knows his oath 100%. Don't eat wheat bread. That was his oath. He knows that. His mistake is he eats this thing. He thinks it's barley bread, but it's really wheat bread. That's a mistake in the object.
He didn't forget. He didn't forget it. He just mistaken one for the other. You would even say that's an oinus. According to what we said before, that would be an oinus. Right? Like you said about the coffee. You said not to drink coffee, and then you drink something you didn't know was coffee.
Yeah.
So this could be considered.
That might be. I see Abaye's answer is a little bit tricky for me to understand. That might be the idea of it. So let's see what Abaye's answer is. Amar le Abaye says, "Klum mechayeves le korban ela amay detafis biyadei." The whole reason why he's in violation is because whatever is holding in his hand, he thinks that's permissible.
Right.
And why is that? Helam shvuahu. That's because he forgot that the oath applies to this item. That's still forgetting the oath. I do exactly know in my head what the oath is, but what's my mistake? My mistake isn't that this is barley bread. My mistake is that I didn't think this item was what was applied to my oath. Therefore, my mistake is still in the oath. That's why in Eretz Yisrael they still laughed at this statement. It's a little bit tricky to follow exactly how Rabbi is saying it.
But it's not that he picked the item and didn't know it was
He doesn't know the item is.
He thought it was his item.
Correct. He thought it was what he wanted. No, he thought he had barley bread. He thought it was permissible.
His item,
right. But the mistake is still that he did not realize that this item was prohibited by his oath. Therefore, it still goes back to his oath.
Yeah, it sounds like an onus to me.
Like a guy says, I'm not going to have wheat products.
Right.
And he goes and he has like licorice.
But he didn't know.
Correct.
But
That's what this is. And therefore, we're still saying that's a violation only because he did not realize that this item applies to his oath, not a problem in the item. That's what Abai is suggesting. So whichever way we look at it, we're always twisting it back into including the oath. Now, having said that, right? Lishna achrina, there's another version. Amar le Abai says to Rav Yosef, sof, korban de kamaisi, Allah, he's still going to bring a korban for it, to high pas mihos helim shvuahu. This bread is still a forgetfulness of his oath, in the sense that he did not realize that this bread applies to his oath. For Rav Yosef, Amar lach, and Rav Yosef will explain to him, kevan dechi yoda le dechitenhu, pirish minei. Helam chefetzu. Rav Yosef says, no, but the point is that if you were to tell him, hey, that piece of bread has wheat in it, he would put it down.
Right. That's the whole thing. He didn't forget the item. He didn't forget the oath. He didn't recognize the item to be what he thought it was. That's all it was.
So you like Rav Yosef?
I like Rav Yosef.
I'm okay with that.
It just sticks.
I'm okay with that, right? But I understand that we have to go back and forth to explain why the Rabbanan didn't, why in Eretz Yisrael they didn't like to make that distinction, but we do see what Rav Yosef is saying. Rav Yosef's statement makes good sense to us.
Right. Mm-hmm.
As I said, it's a little tricky Gemara and splitting the hairs between the two things.
Right.
But now that we have this idea that there is a distinction between forgetting the oath and forgetting the object, Rava asked Rav Nachman the following question. Helam Zevazeh, this is our old question. Let's say you forget both things. You forget the object and you forgot what your oath was. Meaning, you thought, right, that you swore to eat wheat bread, and then you reach into the basket thinking that you're taking out barley. And then you eat it. But meanwhile, you forgot your oath, which was to not eat wheat, and you didn't realize that this bread was wheat, so you did both things. So now, Mahu, what happens here? Do we say that since he forgot the oath, he's liable to sacrifice? Or do we say, but he also forgot the object, therefore he's not liable to sacrifice?
I would say he's a high carbon.
Good, let's see what you're right. Okay. Amar le, so he said to him, Harei helam shvua biyado. He says what Brian says. That, look, he did at the end of the day forget the shvua. And that is what's critical to determining. V'chayev, and he's liable. Yeah, but Adarabba, the other way is also true. Look at the other way. Harei chayfetz biyado. He forgot the object too. Upater, so he should be exempt. So Amar Rashi says, Chazinon, we see, I machma shvua kaporish. Hai helam shvua biyado. Look, if somebody said to him, hey, right, if they told him, you swore to not eat wheat. And he goes, I swore to not eat wheat. Oh, then I better not eat this. Then it was the shvua that he forgot. Right? V'chayev, so he's liable in that case. If you tell him, hey, that barley bread has wheat in it, and that's when he puts it down, so then hareham chayfetz biyado, then the issue was the object. And so patr, therefore he's exempt. Amar le Ravina Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, time out. Klum parish mishvua el mishum chayfetz, klum parish chayfetz el mishum shvua. Yeah, but it's irrelevant because at the end of the day, when you point out to him and say, no, your shvua was to not eat wheat, he still thinks he's holding a barley bread. Therefore, what's happening when you reminded him your shvua was to not eat wheat? He goes, shvua to not eat wheat? Oh, that's right, that was my shvua to not eat wheat. Why is he telling me that if I'm holding barley? Oh, it must be wheat. And then he put it down.
Yeah, but the shvua...
It's both things. The item, whatever, it doesn't matter what you just told me. At some point, I got to remember both what my shvua was and realize I'm holding a wheat bread.
But it doesn't... But the shvua includes the bread itself. The shavua is encompassing of the item.
Yes.
So therefore, if you forget the shavua, you obviously forget the item, right? Because you don't even remember you made a shavua. It's like, I don't even remember swearing I was going to give...
So therefore, what's causing you to put it down?
So I would say that... No, I'd say the havamin is the shavua, and the maskana is the...
So we wanted to say it was dependent on what I reminded you. If I told you, hey, that's wheat bread, then you're putting it down. Isn't it because of the bread? No, not necessarily. Because I also it's because I also remind. It's the reminder which reminds me of both things. So therefore, el loshnos. Therefore, the answer is it makes no difference. That's not a good test. So we don't know. We leave that as I don't know.
I don't like it.
We leave that as I don't know. But meaning Rav Nachman. Rav asked Rav Nachman the following questions. We switch over to Chavav Amid Beis. Here's our question that we promised was coming. How do you have a shvua b'shogeg in the past tense? Right. Because id yada, if you knew what you were saying was a lie, you're mazidhu. And id lo yada, and if you don't know what you're saying is a lie, anushu, then you're nones. So what's shogeg? There's no such thing as shogeg. We understood the future tense, shogeg, right? He forgot about what he swore, but we don't understand the past tense. So Omar le, the answer is what he said. But Omar yodea anisha shvuazu asura. He says, I know this oath is prohibited. But you know what I don't know? I don't know whether I'm going to be liable to sacrifice for it. That makes him shogeg. Isn't that interesting? He knows he's lying. If he knew he was lying, and he knew that if he was lying b'shogeg, he'd be chayav a korban, he gets malchus. But if he knows he's lying, and he knows he's supposed to get malchus, but he did not know that if he was shogeg, he gets the korban, that makes him shogeg, and now he has to bring a korban.
Can we say that for the future too, though?
No.
Why?
Because in the future, we can actually have a shogeg of forgetting your oath.
But can we also say, like, I didn't know the consequence was malchus?
So we're going to say that it might. I'm gonna just hang on till you hear Moonbaz, which is a great name. But if you hang on till you hear, it sounds Moonbaz, or it sounds like one of like sounds like Sonny and Cher's kids, or what is it like, or somebody like right? Zappa. That's right, Zappa. That's right, right? Okay, so it sounds like that. Anyway. So Keman, who's this like Moonbaz? This is like Moonbaz's statement to Amar. As he says, Shigagas Korban Shma Shigaga, in any Avera in the Torah. Yeah. If you don't know, if you're bemazed, but you don't know that if you did it b'shogeg, you can bring a korban, that in itself is enough to make you a shogeg person, and now you're going to bring a korban for it. So therefore, maybe that's Moonbaz's statement. It applies in all cases. Right. No, the answer is afilu tem rabbanan. In this circumstance, this is a rule that applies only to past tense shvuos. Even according to the Rabbanan who don't hold that way in general, hold that way when it comes to past tense shvuos. Why? Ad kan lo pligi Rabbanan le b'munbaz ella b'kol haTorah kula. Yeah, the Rabbanan don't really argue, except everywhere. I love that statement, right? The Rabbanan don't really argue with munbaz except everywhere. Delav chidushu, right? Because there's no there's nothing unique about the rule that if you violate a prohibition in the Torah that you're chayav kares for, that b'shogeg, you get a korban. That's something everybody should know. The fact that you didn't know it is irrelevant, right? That's something that's widely known. Aval hacha, but here, dechidushu. This is a unique past tense oath. It's a very unique situation. We never find a situation in the Torah where I commit a lo saseh, where I should get malchus. And if I do it b'shogeg, I bring a korban olav yored. De'alfinon me avodah zarah. Why is that? Because usually the lo saseh rules follow the korban of avodah zarah. Right. And avodah zarah is my general. That's my stereotype. Lo saseh, where I get kares for doing it b'mezid, and therefore bring a korban b'shogeg, because that's where the pasuk tells me about korban chatos. So therefore, that's generally the rule. If I do a avera that I'm chayav kares b'mezid, then I bring a korban chatos b'shogeg. V'hacha, but here, maisi afilu rabbanan modi. Here, it's a lo saseh. So therefore, even the rabbanan would agree that this is a unique circumstance. Therefore, awareness of that fact that this is a unique type of lo saseh is important to make this into a mazid. You know what you need to know in order to be mazid? You really need to know everything about this avera. You need to know that if you do it on purpose, you get malchus. You need to know that you'd get a korban olav yored if you did it b'shogeg. If you're not fully aware of how this avera works, then you're a shogeg. Still a little bit strange, because the fact that you are turning from mazid to shogeg based on what you don't know about shogeg is still a little bit of a brain shaker for me, but that's the idea, right? You don't know everything there is to know about this avera, therefore you don't become a shogeg. Ravina asks Rava the fine question. Nishbal kikar umistakein aleha mahu. Let's say a person takes an oath that he's not going to eat this loaf of bread, and now it becomes dangerous, and he's got to eat something. Okay, he's got low blood sugar, diabetes. I don't know what it is. He's got to get this, and now it's dangerous. Mistakim lishrei. What are you talking about? If it's dangerous, then he's got to eat it. What's your question? That's right. Lishrei and mar. Of course, it's permissible. Ella mitztair ve'achla b'shiga shvua. Rather, no, it's not dangerous, but he becomes really craving it. Really, it bothers him that he can't have it, and then he forgets about his shvua. So it's two things. He really would have eaten it anyway. Had he known that he had the shvua, he would have eaten it anyway because he couldn't resist. But he forgot. So now the question is he shogeg because he forgot about his shvuah, or is he mazid because he would have eaten it anyway? So what's the halacha there? So Amar Le, Tanina, we learned shav midato, that so he has to maybe korban. If somebody repents and does tshuva, then he brings a korban. Al shigaso on his shogeg avera. Lo shav mi yediaso, if he doesn't repent from his avera, ein mivi korban al shigaso, then he does not bring a korban on what he forgot. So therefore, since he wouldn't have repented, had he known, he would have done it anyway, then he doesn't bring a korban, even though he did this b'shogeg. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Gmar belibo tzarich sheyotze bisfasav. Shmuel makes a statement, and this is a statement we sort of had this conversation when we first started talking about Shevuos. If a person decides something in his heart, right, he wants to swear to something, he has to speak it. He has to say it out loud in order for it to be a shvuah. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, livate bisfasayim, it has to be an utterance of the lips. Meisve, but we have a question on that because we're going to see brises that seem to imply not like that. Bisfasayim velo believe, right? If somebody says something out loud, but not in his heart, gamar belibo minayin. So let's say, right? So he has to speak it out, not in his heart. It has to be spoken out. Then it says, let's say he decides something in his heart. How do I know that's included as a shvuah? Talmud lomer l'kosher yivate adam b'shvuah, right? Anything that a person utters from his mouth not with his mouth, a person utters as a shvuah. So now, hagufa kasha, that's self-contradictory. Because Amar, first you said bisfasayim v'lo believe. First, the brisa says, it's got to be spoken out, not in your mind. The Hadar Amar, then the very next line is, Gamar belibo minayin, how are you going to include a shvuah that he has in his mind? Well, you just said it. Well, it doesn't work in your mind. So what do you mean there's a pasuk that includes what's in your mind? So Rav Sheshes, holo kasher. Rav Sheshes says that's not a contradiction. Hachi kamer, this is what it means. Bisvasayim velo gamar belibo. Let's say he speaks something out, but he didn't think that in his mind. He misspoke, right? Lahotzi bisvasav velo hotzi, right? So velo gamar so velo shegamar belibo lahotzi bisvasav velo hotzi. Am I reading that right? I'm not reading that right. He says, Bisfasayim. So Rav Sheshes explains that it says Bisfasayim, velo shegamar libo lahotzi bisfasav velo hotzi. Right? What happens is this shvuah doesn't work. It has to be with your lips. It doesn't work if he thought it in his mind to say it and then he didn't say it. Right? If he thinks to himself, I'm gonna promise something, but then he never does it, that doesn't count. That's number one. That's the first thing. Now, however, Gamar Belibo Stam, let's say he decides in his mind that he's going to do something, but he never said, I'm going to speak it out loud, right? So if he's decided in his mind, I'm going to swear this, I'm going to promise this, right? He's sitting by his seat and he says, when they call me up for an aliyah, I'm going to promise $1,000. But they don't call him up. So he never pronounces it. So then that doesn't count. Because he said, I'm going to pronounce it. He never did it.
Would that be like a false swear?
No, he didn't swear. That's the point. He never said it. He said, when I get up and when I'm going to say it, okay, but you decide in your mind that you're going to say it. Then you didn't say it. It doesn't count. Okay?
But even if you decide in your mind, it doesn't.
Now, this one, the other one is, you're sitting in shul and you go, you know what, I really love this shul. I'm going to donate $1,000 to this shul. But you didn't say, I'm going to announce that. You decided in your mind. So minayin. So how do I know that does work? Right? That does work. So Talmud Lomer says, anything of the utterance. So therefore, I can include things of the mind. That's what Rav Sheshes is saying. Things of the mind do work as long as I didn't think to myself, I'm going to say it out loud. Right? If I specify in my mind, I'm going to say it out loud and I'm going to declare it, then you're right. If you don't declare it, then it doesn't count. But if you just think it in your mind and that's all that you want to do, then that's it. You're obligated. So El Shmuel Kasha, that's going to be a question on Shmuel, because Shmuel seemed to imply it doesn't work unless you speak it. So how are you going to explain this? How Shmuel explain this? Some are of Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes explains Taritz ve'emahachi. This is how you have to explain it like this. Bis fasayim velo shegamar belibo lahotzi. If somebody, it says, right, he has to speak it out, and it isn't where he comes to, in his own mind that he's going to speak it out. So, for example, right, person says paschitin, he thinks in his mind, I'm going to swear to not eat wheat bread. the hotzi pasorin, and he accidentally misspoke, and he said barley bread. Okay, in that case, that's not a shvuah. Not only is that not a shvuah, it's not a shvuah at all. It doesn't count on the barley bread. It doesn't count on the wheat bread. It doesn't count on the barley bread because that wasn't what you intended in your mind. It doesn't count on the wheat bread because you didn't specify wheat bread. You didn't say wheat bread, so it doesn't count at all. Gamar belibo lahotzi. If you decided in your own mind to make the oath pas chitin, that you're going to say, I'm not going to eat wheat bread, hotzi pas stam, but you then said, I'm going to not eat bread, so minayin, that does work. How do I know that? So it's not that you don't, that if you think it in your mind, that doesn't do anything, Rav Sheshes is clarifying. You're right, thinking in your mind doesn't do anything. What does is, if you think in your mind, I'm going to make a donation of $1,000, and then you speak up and you say, I'm going to make a donation, then you are obligated to the $1,000.
If you use the lashon Shevuos.
Right,
Shevuos, right? You can't
you
just
should say beli neder, right? And just thinking, if you don't speak it at all, then it doesn't count, right? It's just what we're making the statement here is that when you speak what you speak, that makes it an oath. Understanding what it is that you meant by what you said comes from your mind. And so therefore, even if you didn't speak out what you clearly meant, that statement of what you made in your mind is obligatory on you. Okay? So
unless you say the wrong thing.
Unless you say the wrong thing. If you specifically, if I'm going to say, I was thinking I'm going to give up,
say 10,000,
then it doesn't count. And not only you're not mechuyev to the 1,000, you're not mechuyev to the 10,000, you're mechuyev to anything.
That's crazy that what's in your mind.
Yeah.
You know how many promises I make myself every day that I today?
Go back.
The day I
That won't be obligatory, right?
Right.
Right?
I don't bring it to my.
But if you think to yourself, right? If you say,
in terms of the loshon, you have to use
You have to say like the word
Shvuah.
Yeah,
You have to use that.
you have to, because if it's not a shvuah, it's not a shvuah, right? Now, this is the problem: is that when we say that we're going to, let's say we do a Taras Nedarim, we specifically say anything that I didn't say b'li neder, because you wind up in auctions about languages that we use, whether we meant it as a shvuah or whether we didn't mean it as a shvuah. So best to say b'li neder. Right, that's your idea, Jeff.
Say bli neder, does it get you out of your?
That's your. Everybody's got their takeaway. This is the takeaway from this Masech. Jeff, I can see. Make sure he's going to say bli neder a lot more than he used to.
That's right.
Very important. Bli neder, he's going to say bli neder more often.
People do it with the ring. They put the ring on their wife.
Sorry.
We also say that everything I say in the upcoming year.
Hooray, we could have
That's yes. We try to do that in order to be able to make sure.
So when I get an order from a customer and I tell them you'll have it in 2 to 4 weeks,
Bli neder.
to this goy, and I say bli neder,
That's correct.
then I'm not.
That is correct.
Okay, good.
Right? Because the issue is you're not promising it. Okay.
Right.
Maybe we'll stop here at Mace rather than get to the end because
Go ahead. Very nice.
3-4 minutes of stuff.